Hey, what's up guys? Today I have a review and my thoughts on the Rokinon 12mm f2 for the Fuji X mount system. This lens gets a lot of praise from the Fujifilm shooters, but I don't see too many of them talking about the negatives of this lens. So I want to share my thoughts after using this lens for a few months. So remember, these are all of my own opinion. I'm not trying to say this lens is bad in any way because it's a pretty damn awesome lens. But I want to make sure you guys have an informed decision when purchasing this lens. So this is a third-party lens for the Fuji X system. You can pick this up brand new for about under 300 bucks on Amazon and even used under $200. It's a really good value and it has a clicky aperture, which is nice. It has an f2 aperture, lets in a ton of more light than say the 10-24 or even the Zeiss 12mm. I originally bought this lens just to do astrophotography and some interior shots because of the f2. This lens also has very low chroma. It's probably one of the lowest chroma lenses I've ever used when doing astrophotography. It's crazy. The stars are really small and they're sharp. Instead of having these oblong shapes throughout the frame, this lens keeps the stars nice and round, which is awesome. Makes for really beautiful Milky Way shots. It's fairly compact, especially if you take off the hood. There's a front lens element. It is an aspherical element, so it bulges out a little bit. Metal mount. Yes, it has a metal mount. It does have a threaded filter ring. At the top of my head, I can't remember what's the filter size, but I'll put it in the video. The lens is mostly made out of plastic. It's a very good quality plastic for a third-party Korean lens. It is actually pretty damn well made, I must say. Sharpness wise, this lens is very sharp throughout the frame. I don't have any issues with the sharpness whatsoever. Even in the far corners, it is sharper than the Fujifilm 10-24. It is a manual focus only lens. That might be the downfall to some, but with the Fuji system or other mirrorless systems out there, most cameras have focus peaking nowadays. So with the focus peaking, it's very easy to focus this lens. And you know what? There's a very short focus throw on this lens as well. And it's very dampened, so you can make really fine adjustments, no problems. If you're shooting Fuji system, recommend going into the settings and turning the option on to shoot with no lens attached. Otherwise it won't work. So what I recommend doing is shooting at f8 and shooting closer to infinity if you're doing landscapes, because mostly everything you point this lens at is going to be in focus no matter what because of the ultra wide angle. Another really cool feature about this lens is having the f2 and the minimum focus distance. This thing can focus really close. I mean like this close. It's that close. And you can get some really interesting shots. And the background is almost completely blown out. You almost wouldn't even think you're using an ultra wide angle lens. You get some really creative shots. So now I want to talk to you about the negatives I found with this lens after using it for a few months. One of the first things I noticed was how dark the lens was through the viewfinder. I thought maybe I'm doing something wrong. I shoot an aperture priority, so the camera will automatically adjust the exposure for me anyways, and sometimes I might make adjustments using the exposure comp dial. But no matter what I did, same exposure, even if I put it on manual exposure, and I changed the lenses from my Fuji lens to this lens is almost a stop and a half darker no matter what I did. I couldn't figure out what the heck was going on. So oftentimes I would overexpose to compensate so I can see what I'm shooting. It was that dark. And so I wasn't quite sure what was going on. After loading the photos up in Lightroom, I applied lens corrections and boom! The image was 10 times brighter. Okay, not 10 times, but maybe a stop brighter in some scenarios. But it made a big difference. And so that tells me this lens has a lot of vignetting, and that is something you need to take into consideration. Yes, it can be corrected, and it looks okay for most images when using the lens corrections. But I noticed another little issue when using the lens corrections when you're taking a landscape shot, say of a nice blue sky and there's some white puffy clouds in there, when you correct the lens, it'll brighten up the corners, but the middle of the frame is still a little darker than the outside, so it creates this weird like polarization effect. It's very hard to correct. It can be corrected, but it takes a lot more time than I'm willing to put into it. You know, that's the downside of these cheaper lenses, is the distortion, the vignetting. Overall, it's not that big of a deal most of the time, especially if you're doing interior work or astrophotography or even landscapes on a nice cloudy day. You're not gonna notice this at all. So for me personally, this lens don't have autofocus. Now that's not a big deal for most people, like I mentioned earlier, but I like to do a lot of video and sometimes it's run and gun. I prefer having ultra wide angle for doing video work. I just like that style more. And having the optical image stabilization and autofocus is far more important than this lens to me. I don't shoot that much astrophotography or interior work where I need the f2. If I'm doing interior work, I'd prefer to have the 10 to 24 because 10mm is significantly wider than 12mm, which leads me into my next point. Equivalent of an 18mm lens on a full frame camera. I never really liked that focal length in the prime. I don't really like ultra wide angle primes in general. I just find them hard to use sometimes because they're either too wide or not wide enough. And having an ultra wide angle zoom lens is much more useful, much more convenient, and a lot more versatile than having an ultra wide angle prime. In my opinion, a lot of people love ultra wide angle primes and there's nothing wrong with that. For me personally, I prefer ultra wide angle zooms over a prime. A lot also mention the colors of this lens is very equivalent of the Fujifilm colors. Now I'm not saying the colors are bad or anything, but they're just a little bit different than I'm used to from the other Fujifilm lenses. You wouldn't think lenses would make a big difference when it comes to colors, but it does. And this lens is very apparent of that. It does have a little bit different color tone. And for some reason, it doesn't jive with me very well. I just don't like it. I don't know what it is. It just has a weird different tone, and I can't seem to match my images when I use this lens. It's weird. But a lot of people really love it, and there's nothing wrong with it. It still looks pretty good. Hey, we're all different. So the last thing I wanted to mention about this lens, and ultimately this was a deal breaker for me, and that is the sunstars. This lens has pretty ugly sunstars. It's probably the worst I've ever seen. It creates some really massive sunstars, and I just don't like the look of it. They're very distracting. You know, hey, some people really like it. So overall, you know, for the money, this is a damn good lens. And I do recommend it depending on what you're doing. And if you can deal with the limitations, I say go buy it. For the money, this is a really great value for what you get. 12mm, f2 aperture, low coma, very sharp, easy to focus. What's not to love? Except for those few other things I mentioned, like ugly sunstars. God, man, those things are just crazy looking sometimes. I've enjoyed using this lens, but for me personally, I just prefer the 10 to 24. And I don't do astrophotography or interiors where I need f2 all that often. So this lens just ends up sitting in my bag most of the time. But man, still, this thing is impressive for the money. I can't get over it. So that's pretty much all I got for you guys today. Hope you guys liked this video. And if you want to see more reviews like that, please subscribe. And if you like this video, give me a thumbs up. If not, well, you know what to do. And if you have any suggestions, comments, leave them below. Don't forget to check out the links in the description to my Instagram. And thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.